Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive into Alphabet Inc., the company behind Google. We're going to be looking at, are they still a great company? Is this a company you should be investing in? Are you prepping for a meeting about Alphabet? Are you just curious about this tech giant?
Yeah.
So we have a really in-depth analyst report from Morningstar.
Okay.
And we also have some really interesting news about Alphabet and their work in quantum computing and AI.
All right.
Okay, so first things first, the money.
Yeah, got to talk about it.
Alphabet recently shared their Q3 earnings, and they are pretty impressive.
Very impressive.
A 15% increase in revenue year over year. That puts them at $88 billion with a B.
Wow.
Advertising and cloud revenue seem to be the main drivers of this performance.
Yeah, for sure.
So my question is, with all this talk about antitrust issues with Google, are these numbers a surprise, or does it just prove how powerful they really are?
That's a great question. And I think that if you look at the details even closer, search advertising grew by 12%. So that suggests that Google search is not being disrupted as much as some feared.
Okay.
And if we think about what management is saying, they had some positive commentary on AI overviews. And I think that might be driving some of this.
Can you remind me what AI overviews are?
Yeah, so it's essentially AI stepping in to kind of summarize search results for you right at the top of the page.
Okay.
So it'll save you time, help you find what you're looking for faster, and apparently it's driving more ad clicks.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Pretty smart.
Speaking of smart moves, Alphabet just released Gemini 2.0, their newest AI model, and it's creating a lot of buzz.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
OpenAI has been seen as kind of the leader in AI for the past couple of years, and Alphabet's been lagging behind.
Right.
But with Gemini 2.0 and this new quantum chip Willow that they've been developing, it seems like Alphabet is catching up, maybe even changing the game. Yeah.
So what does this AI competition mean for, everyday people? Is it going to come down to who has the best AI model? Yeah, that's a good question. And I think the interesting thing here is that Alphabet might be approaching this differently, according to this analyst note.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're focused on almost commoditizing the model layer.
Okay.
So making the models themselves cheaper and easier to use, which would encourage more people to adopt them.
So how does that make them money?
Think about the public cloud.
Okay.
As more businesses start relying on these AI models, they're going to need serious cloud computing power.
Right.
And guess who's a major player in the public cloud market?
Alphabet.
Exactly.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. So let's zoom out a bit.
Okay.
And look at Alphabet's overall business strategy. They have so many different projects going on, it can be hard to even keep track.
It can be.
Yeah.
But I think that's also what makes them so interesting.
Right.
Their main strategy seems to be to keep their core advertising business through Google search very strong.
Right.
While also pouring resources into areas with potential for future growth, like cloud computing and AI.
That's a tough balancing act.
It is a tough balancing act.
Yeah. So what are some of the risks and rewards they're facing with this strategy?
Well, I think we should look at what the bulls and the bears are saying about Alphabet's future.
Okay. All right. Let's hear the good news first.
Yeah.
What are the bulls excited about?
So the bulls are really confident in Alphabet's powerful advertising business online. They have a huge reach, and they think that they can just continue to print money from advertising,
Okay.
which lets them invest heavily in things like Google Cloud and AI.
Right.
And then also they see Alphabet as a major player in this growing cloud computing market as more and more businesses go digital.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about the bears? What are they worried about?
So the bears are worried about a couple of things.
Okay.
First of all, they're worried about Alphabet's reliance on advertising, especially those text-based ads. That's still their main source of revenue, even though they're branching out.
Right.
Any problems in the advertising market could hurt them. And then those more experimental projects, those other bets like self-driving cars,
Oh, right.
they're losing money.
Okay.
And then, of course, we can't ignore the threat of regulation
Right.
and potential breakups.
Okay. They definitely have a lot to deal with. But before we get into the risks, I want to talk about this term that keeps popping up, economic moat.
Yeah.
What exactly does that mean, and how strong is Alphabet's moat?
It's a really good question. I think of it as a way to measure how well a company can protect its profits from competitors.
Okay.
So how hard is it for other companies to steal their business?
Right.
The wider the moat, the harder it is for rivals to compete. And Morningstar gives Alphabet a wide moat rating, which is a really good sign.
Okay, so what's protecting Alphabet's profits then?
Well, they have multiple layers of defense.
Okay.
Things like brand recognition, their technological expertise, the fact that more and more people keep using their products, which makes them even stronger.
Right.
But I think the core of their moat, the foundation, is Google search.
That makes sense. It's still most people's go-to search engine, even with all the competition out there.
Exactly. And I think a large part of that is something called network effects.
Okay.
So the more people use Google search, the better it gets at giving them relevant results, which attracts even more users.
Right.
It's this cycle that keeps feeding itself. And then you add in their huge amount of data, the exclusive deals they have with device manufacturers, even how they price things to maximize ad revenue. And you start to see how difficult it is to compete with them.
Yeah, I could definitely see how strong their position is. But you mentioned some threats earlier.
Yeah.
Even with all these defenses, are there any weaknesses?
Well, there are always companies trying to challenge the leader, especially in tech, where things change so quickly.
Right.
You know, you have companies like Amazon and Meta trying to take over specific parts of the market. You have these new search engines like SearchGPT that are trying to completely change how search works.
Right.
So it's a constant battle.
So is Alphabet just sitting back and watching these challengers come after them?
No, not at all. They are investing heavily in their own AI products like Gemini to stay ahead of the curve.
Okay.
And what's interesting is that if you look at the PC market, it kind of shows that Google's strength isn't just about being the default option on devices. Even when people have other choices, they often choose Google anyway.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so knowing all of this, what's Alphabet actually worth?
The big reveal.
Yeah.
So Morningstar has come up with a fair value estimate of $220 per share.
Okay. How did they arrive at that number?
So they've built this model based on how they think Alphabet will grow in the future.
Okay.
Here's a breakdown. Google search is expected to keep growing at a decent rate, mid to high single digits, even as the online advertising market matures.
Okay.
YouTube, on the other hand, is predicted to have low double-digit growth, fueled by both ads and subscriptions.
Got it.
And then the real star of the show is Google Cloud.
Okay.
They think that will grow a whopping 27% each year. So it looks like it's going to be a much bigger part of Alphabet's business in the coming years.
Wow. That's a lot of growth.
It is.
So is it safe to say that Alphabet is going to be successful forever?
Well, you know, there are always some uncertainties. For example, they also modeled what would happen if things went wrong. A bear case scenario.
Okay.
In that case, antitrust regulations hurt Google's search revenue, causing it to decline by 4% each year. And in that scenario, their fair value estimate drops to $162 per share.
That's a big difference.
Yeah, it is.
Is there like a best case scenario?
Oh, yeah. There's always a best case scenario. So imagine a world where Google search remains dominant, but they no longer have those restrictive agreements with device manufacturers and other partners.
Okay.
So they could save a ton of money on those deals.
Interesting.
In this optimistic bull case, Alphabet's fair value estimate jumps to $246 per share.
Wow. Okay. So many possibilities.
There are.
Speaking of possibilities, what about those antitrust lawsuits? How are they progressing, and are they a serious threat to Alphabet?
You know, it's definitely something to keep an eye on. Morningstar gives Alphabet a medium uncertainty rating, so they recognize the risks from these lawsuits. But they also believe in Alphabet's strong financial position and their ability to adapt.
Okay, so what are some of the worst-case scenarios here? What could actually happen?
Well, the Department of Justice is suggesting some pretty drastic measures, including breaking up Google.
Oh, wow.
And maybe even forcing them to sell Chrome and Android.
That sounds really extreme.
It is, but it's important to remember that these are just proposals for now.
Okay.
And the appeals process could take years, giving Alphabet time to adjust their strategy.
Okay.
And what's interesting is that some analysts actually think that antitrust action could help Alphabet in the long run.
How is that possible?
So it might force them to loosen their control on those exclusive deals.
Okay.
Making them less reliant on them and potentially more adaptable in the future.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So let's shift gears a bit and talk about how Alphabet uses its money. Are they sitting on piles of cash?
Yeah.
Or are they investing it wisely?
Well, Morningstar actually gives them a top rating, exemplary.
Oh, wow.
For capital allocation. They're impressed with how Alphabet manages its finances, makes smart investments, and keeps its shareholders happy.
Okay, so what are they actually doing?
So first of all, they have over $110 billion in cash and cash equivalents.
Wow.
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
And they've proven to be very good at investing it. acquiring companies like Android, YouTube, and DoubleClick, which have all become crucial parts of their success.
Right.
They also invest heavily in research and development, especially in AI, which is essential for their future growth. And let's not forget about their shareholders. They have a stock buyback program and even pay dividends every quarter.
Sounds like they're doing a lot of things right.
They are.
So is anything stopping them from investing even more aggressively?
Well, the antitrust scrutiny definitely limits their ability to make big acquisitions right now.
Right.
They need to be careful not to attract even more attention from regulators.
That makes sense. We've covered a lot of ground here. Earnings, AI, business strategy, how they protect their profits, even antitrust lawsuits.
Yeah, it's been a lot.
So before we move on to part 2, can you give us a quick recap of the key takeaways?
Absolutely. So even with all these challenges, Alphabet is still a financial powerhouse with a strong ability to defend its profits and continue growing their dominant businesses like Google Search and YouTube are still bringing in a lot of revenue.
Mm-hmm.
And they have great potential to grow even more in areas like cloud computing and AI. But the antitrust situation is unpredictable.
Right.
You know, it's complicated, it's constantly changing. There are a lot of potential outcomes.
Yeah.
But Alphabet has a history of being flexible and making smart investments.
Right.
Which is a good sign for their future.
Okay, great summary. Now, before we move on to part 2 of our deep dive, I want to leave you with something to think about.
Right.
We've been talking about how much Alphabet is investing in AI, but it raises an important question. What are the ethical implications of a company this big and this powerful creating AI technology that's becoming more and more advanced?
Mm-hmm.
Just something to consider as we learn more about Alphabet.
Absolutely.
We'll be back with more insights in part 2, so make sure to stay tuned.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We are continuing our exploration of Alphabet Inc., looking at their financial performance and future prospects.
It's pretty amazing to see how much they've grown since starting as just a search engine. Now they're a global force involved in almost every aspect of our digital lives.
Yeah, it's true. And I think that's what makes analyzing them so interesting. Alphabet isn't just a company.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a reflection of how technology is shaping our world.
Right. And, that makes you think about those ethical questions we touched on earlier with all the data they're collecting and the powerful algorithms they're creating. There's a lot to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. As AI becomes more and more advanced, we really have to think critically about how it might impact things like privacy, fairness, even democracy.
Absolutely. Yeah. Those are big questions for society as a whole. But for now, let's bring it back to the financial side of things. We talked about Alphabet's strengths, but what are some of the specific risks they need to navigate?
Well, I think one of the most immediate concerns, as we discussed earlier, is the regulatory landscape.
Mm-hmm.
Those antitrust lawsuits could really change how Alphabet does business, especially if they're forced to break up or sell off certain parts of the company.
Right. It's fascinating how the analysts seem to have different opinions on whether those antitrust actions would ultimately help or hurt Alphabet in the long run.
It's a complicated issue. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Some people think that more regulation would stifle innovation and ultimately hurt Alphabet's long-term growth.
Right.
Others argue that it could actually level the playing field, create more competition, which would ultimately benefit everyone, including Alphabet.
Okay, so it seems like we'll have to wait and see how that all plays out. But besides antitrust issues, what other challenges are on Alphabet's radar?
Well, competition is always a factor, especially in tech where everything moves so fast.
Right.
We talked about Amazon and Microsoft and cloud computing, but, there are always new companies popping up in AI and even search, all trying to take a bite out of Alphabet's market share.
Right. Speaking of search, it seems like Google has had an unbreakable hold on that market for years. Mm-hmm. Is there anything out there that could actually threaten their dominance?
That's a good question. I think those generative search engines we mentioned before,
right,
those are trying to change the way search works entirely by using AI to give you more conversational and personalized results. Mm-hmm. It remains to be seen if they can really overcome Google's just massive size and data advantage.
It's interesting to think about how search might evolve in the future. What other risks should investors be aware of when considering Alphabet?
Well, data privacy is a big one. Alphabet has been criticized for how they collect and use data.
Mm-hmm.
Any mistakes in this area could really damage their reputation, lead to costly fines, stricter regulations.
Right. Trust is so important in the digital world.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. What about their financial stability? Are there any red flags we should be aware of when we look at Alphabet's balance sheet?
Not really. As we discussed earlier, they're in a very strong financial position with a ton of cash on hand. Their debt is manageable. They have strong cash flow.
So it doesn't sound like we need to worry about them going bankrupt anytime soon.
That's highly unlikely.
Okay.
But, even the most financially secure companies can face unexpected challenges and economic downturns, sudden shifts in consumer behavior, even disruptive new technologies.
Yeah.
Those could all impact their performance.
Right. It's a good reminder that no investment is completely without risk. Speaking of investments, how does Alphabet compare to other companies in terms of valuation? Is it a good time to buy their stock?
That's a good question, and I think it really depends on your individual investment goals and how much risk you're comfortable with. But, based on Morningstar's analysis, it seems like Alphabet's stock is currently trading at a slight discount compared to their estimated fair value.
So it might be a good opportunity to buy some shares.
It's possible, but I think it's important to really think about both the potential upside and the downside.
Right.
Remember those bull case and bear case scenarios we talked about? The actual outcome could be anywhere in between.
Right. It's always good to consider the full range of possibilities.
Right.
But what about Alphabet's long-term growth potential? Do you think they're well-positioned to keep innovating and expanding?
I think that's where things get really exciting.
Okay.
Their investments in AI, cloud computing, other cutting-edge technologies, it really shows that they're not just resting on their past successes.
It's amazing how they've managed to be both a dominant player in established markets and a leader in developing entirely new ones.
Yeah, it really speaks to their vision and their willingness to take risks.
Right. And, with great power comes great responsibility.
Exactly.
We've talked about the ethical considerations around AI, but what about the potential impact of Alphabet's other ventures on society as a whole?
Yeah, their influence goes far beyond just search and advertising.
Right.
Their self-driving car project, Waymo, could revolutionize transportation. Their healthcare initiatives could transform how we diagnose and treat diseases, and their investments in renewable energy could help us combat climate change.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing to think about the potential impact of all those initiatives. But with such ambitious goals, there are bound to be challenges along the way.
Of course, developing and implementing these technologies will require them to navigate, complicated regulations, address public concerns, overcome unforeseen technical obstacles.
Right. It's a good reminder that progress doesn't always happen in a straight line.
Exactly.
But Alphabet has a history of tackling tough problems and coming out stronger on the other side.
That's true. They've weathered storms before, and they'll likely face new ones in the future.
Yeah.
But their ability to adapt, innovate, and execute has been key to their success so far.
So as we wrap up part 2 of our deep dive,
Yeah.
What are the key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, I think we've seen that Alphabet is a financially sound company with a strong foundation and a history of making smart investments. They're facing some challenges, particularly from regulators and competitors, but they have enormous potential to grow in areas like AI and cloud computing.
And maybe even more importantly, we've explored the broader impact of Alphabet's reach and technological power on society.
Right.
That's a conversation that will only become more important as AI and other emerging technologies continue to shape our world.
Yeah, well said. It's not just about the numbers. It's about understanding the forces that are shaping the future.
We'll be back with more insights on Alphabet in part 3, so make sure to stick with us. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're wrapping up our exploration of Alphabet Incorporated today, taking a look at where this tech giant might be headed in the future. We've covered their financial strategic moves and how their innovations are impacting the world.
Yeah, it's been a really fascinating deep dive, uncovering so much about this complex and powerful company.
Absolutely. We've explored a lot of ground, but there's always more to discover. So, for this final part of our deep dive, let's shift our focus to Alphabet's future. What's next for them? What does the road ahead look like?
Yeah, that's the big question on everyone's mind. And I think what's fascinating is that even with all the uncertainty around things like, antitrust laws and the rapidly changing tech landscape, Alphabet still has some undeniable strengths.
Okay. I'm intrigued. What makes you optimistic about their future?
Well, their commitment to research and development, I think, is absolutely key. They're constantly pushing the limits of what's possible, especially in the field of AI. Those projects we talked about earlier, Gemini and Willow, those are just a glimpse of what they're working on.
So you really believe that AI is going to be crucial to their success going forward?
I think it's hard to overstate how important AI is going to be. You know, it has the potential to completely transform so many industries, from search to advertising, healthcare, even transportation. And I believe Alphabet is in a very unique position to take advantage of this AI revolution.
But we've also talked about how AI is kind of a double-edged sword.
Right.
There are ethical concerns, of course, but are there also like business risks that come with focusing so heavily on AI?
Definitely, developing and implementing AI on a large scale is incredibly complex and expensive. There's no guarantee that all of their investments will pay off, and they could easily encounter setbacks or challenges that they didn't anticipate.
That's a good point. It's important to remember that even the most innovative companies can make mistakes. But let's say, for the sake of discussion, that Alphabet continues to be a leader in AI. How do you see that shaping their future?
Well, think about a world where AI powers even more personalized and immersive experiences, online search results that are tailored to your individual preferences, virtual assistants that anticipate your needs before you even ask.
That sounds amazing and a little bit scary at the same time.
Exactly. The future is full of possibilities, but it also has potential pitfalls. It's really up to us as a society to think critically about, the implications of this technology.
Well said. So beyond AI, what other factors could influence Alphabet's future success?
Well, we have to consider, I think, the increasing importance of geopolitical risks.
Okay.
Things like, trade wars, political instability, regulations changing in different parts of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Those could all have an impact on their operations and profitability.
Yeah, that's true. Global companies are operating in a very complex and interconnected world.
Mm-hmm.
What about the overall economy? How vulnerable is Alphabet to economic downturns?
They're not completely immune, of course.
Right.
If there's a recession, businesses might cut back on advertising, which would impact their revenue. But their diverse range of businesses and strong financial position should help cushion the blow.
So it sounds like they're a relatively safe investment, at least compared to some other companies, even if the economy takes a hit.
I think that's a fair assessment. Another crucial factor to consider, I think, is their ability to attract and keep talented people.
Right.
The competition for top engineers and developers is fierce, and Alphabet needs to make sure they can, hire and retain the best minds in the industry if they want to stay ahead of the curve.
You're right. A company is only as good as its people.
Yeah.
We've discussed some of the potential challenges and opportunities facing Alphabet.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, what's your outlook for the company? Are you optimistic?
I'm cautiously optimistic. There are definitely some significant obstacles ahead, but they also have a proven track record of being innovative, adaptable, and financially sound.
Okay, let's break it down for our listeners one last time. What are the key takeaways from our deep dive into Alphabet Incorporated?
So we've discovered that Alphabet is much more than just a search engine company.
Mm-hmm.
They're really a global technology leader with a wide variety of businesses, a strong financial foundation, and a dedication to pushing the boundaries of what's possible through research and development.
And we can't forget that they're at the forefront of the AI revolution, which could dramatically change both their future and the world as a whole in the years to come.
Exactly. And we've also, explored the various risks and uncertainties they need to navigate, including antitrust lawsuits, competition, the ethical implications of their technology.
Right. It's a complex and constantly evolving landscape. But Alphabet has proven time and again that they can adapt and thrive even when faced with challenges.
It's true. We can't predict the future, but I think Alphabet is well equipped to handle whatever comes their way.
That wraps up our deep dive into Alphabet. We hope you've enjoyed this journey with us as we've explored this fascinating and influential company. As always, we encourage you to keep learning, questioning, and exploring the world of technology and finance. What are your thoughts on Alphabet's future? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Podcast Finance Daily for more deep dives into the financial world.